Hey there. Welcome to Talk of the Tundra, GSPN's Green Bay Packers podcast. Numak is away, your usual host, Jordan Tresky, your usual, semi-usual co-host, also away, but myself, Ty Windisch, and the, geographically closest to this game, Adam
That's right.
McGee from GSPN are on top of it. Only right that we'd have you on for this one, at least based on where the game was, not how it went, Adam. But how's it going, sir?
Well, you say not based on how it went. I am now 0 for 2
I wanted to
on
take that heat
appearances
off you.
on.
I
I'm
was
gonna put it straight out there
okay.
because I don't want anyone else to say it. So I've made 2 appearances on Talk of the Tundra, both planned out in advance, and both ended up being in the aftermath of Packers losses. So maybe no one wants me on the pod ever again. I don't know if I want to be on the pod ever again, but for now, Numac doesn't like to do a loss. I think that's really what the issue is here. So someone had to step up. So here I am, Ty.
Yeah, he's got some sort of a spidey sense for when they're not going to go well, apparently. No, yeah, I think, now that unfortunately one of the other shows that you regularly host, Cruising for a Bruising, I'm rocking the shirt a little
Oh,
late, a
nice.
little late. If you're not watching, you can always watch Talk of the Tundra on GSPN's YouTube and find Cruising, which we'll be back with a post-mortem, I suppose, episode soon in the
Middle this
coming
week.
middle.
Middle this
Okay,
week. I think
yeah.
think we're waiting for some more quotes. I believe it's Tuesday. There's going to be some more Brewers kind of quotes coming out. Andrew wants me to react to them based on how that went last time out. So we'll talk some more Brewers probably sometime around Wednesday.
Check out GSPN info or just search Cruising for a Bruising wherever you listen to this podcast. Also, we've got a bunch of Bucks stuff coming at the Eurostep Podcast Network Bucks feed and some really fun Make Time for This pop culture podcasts as well. So after you listen to this, if you want to just get your mind off the Packers for a few days until the next episode here, there's a lot you can go check out all across the Eurostep Podcast Network. But Adam, we do need to talk about this game. Usually we do, the different sides of the ball, offense, defense. We'll still do that, but this was a game where it does make sense to talk about, not wholly chronologically, but it was a tale of two halves for Green Bay and the New York Giants. The Packers lost 27-22, if you somehow were not aware. And do you want to start with the offense, which I think is, as we agreed before we started recording, the bigger issue, although the defense was not good in this game? Or should we talk about the defense first and then just, save the best course for last? And best in terms of best content, because I think we have a lot to say on the offense.
Honestly, we can go either way because, as you said, this is a tale of two halves for both sides of the ball as well. So either way, whichever one we talk about, there's going to be a progression or more accurately a regression as we carry through our conversation.
Let's do the offense. Let's get right to it. Let's have the main course up first. At halftime, Green Bay is up 20-10, scored 10 points in each of the first two quarters. It was Green Bay's highest scoring first quarter of the season. I believe that it was 7 when only one of the games. They had not been an early score team. This was also the first game where Green Bay scored on their opening drive, I want to say. They scored a field goal, first time out, which had not happened yet. And things look good. The running backs are running. The Packers, some shots down the field, but a lot of, horizontal passing and just incremental plays and moving the ball. Randall Cobb doing what he does. Alan Lazard looking good. Randall Cobb was 1 yard short of 100 in this game. He continues to look like 26-year-old Randall Cobb and really be a revelation, like the Wes Matthews comp is really bearing out here in terms of this guy who, I don't know if any of us expected this from him. That's some of the good. Some of the bad, the offense does not score in the second half. Technically, Green Bay scored 2. The Giants took a safety on purpose because they were kind of bungling running out the clock at the end of the game. But the offense does not find pay dirt whatsoever in the second half. And it was really awful. And we'll get into it. But first, before we get into what went wrong, what was your impression on the first half, the good stuff here from Green Bay?
First half was great. For the first time this season, they were moving the chains consistently. We were really getting some sense of flow, of some rhythm, and a real variance in the offense. I think if you're to look to what does the best version of the Packers offense look like this season. I don't think it's exactly what we saw in the first half, but that's the closest we've probably been to it so far this season. And it comes from a lot of the stuff that obviously Numac, yourself, Todd, or Jordan, me, when I was previously on, we've talked about from the beginning of this podcast through the first weeks of the season. And that is the Packers have to run the ball, and you've got to give the ball to your most talented players. And with the construction of the roster this year, it just so happens that quite comfortably two of your best players are running backs. And maybe not quite to the extent still that we would like to see, but they were doing that. There were good decisions being made in the first half. And not like through any surprise, when you run the ball and you find some success running the ball, that's what's going to open up the field for you to have some of those deeper shots down the field. And they were connecting more. There was, I think, real reason to believe that was a path that Rodgers could have continued to go down. But if you want to go that route, you've also got to keep the defense honest by running the ball. And when things turn south, and what we've seen in previous games this season is, like, if we're going to be kind and we're not going to even just break it down into rushing and passing, it's when the Packers become really predictable, things just stall in a hurry. And more concerningly, once they become really predictable, the Packers just seem to do the same thing over and over again. It's like they don't know to break out of it. A couple of empty trips isn't enough for them to be like, okay, it's time to change this up. It's time to make sure we're mixing up our offense again. They just go back to the well over and over. At this point, it's tough to know, like, is that Rodgers? Is that just Rodgers being like, yeah, I want to air out the ball. Give me the ball, and I want to find my guys, where you're kind of like, most of your guys aren't on this team anymore. Like, there's a learning curve there, as we're all probably tired of hearing at this point. But beyond that, if you want to make it easier for the likes of Romeo Dobbs or Christian Watson, or even someone like Alan Lazard, for as much as he's trusted, is now in just so much bigger of a role than he's ever found himself in on the Packers. You've got to mix up your offense, and you've got to create opportunities where those guys have time and space to make catches, rather than kind of on the swivel, they're just turning and something's being like gunned at their head. So that's part of it that's disappointing, is one that when it falls off from a point where pretty healthy in the first half, it's kind of some of the core principles of what you'd like to see from the offense. But when it goes stagnant, when it goes stale, no one has the awareness. Like Rodgers in his own right, you'd expect to have it. Matt LaFleur, you'd certainly expect to have it. No one at any point is like, okay, we need to go back to the run here. We need to get some easy yards with two of the best running backs in the league. Instead, it's just the same thing over and over again, and the results aren't coming from it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the just, and I think especially this is something I wanted to tackle, as I think maybe the loudest on the GSPN crew for Packers talk, and saying, I do want them to go downfield more, because I thought their offense was almost entirely underneath in some of the first 4 games of the season. And I just thought it's too much. It's too limited. You can do more. The whole point, I think the best version of this Packers offense, this one specifically, is Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon soften up a defense and make it easy to go long. And that's how it has to work. Like, that's how this team is built. That's how LaFleur coaches. And that's when, off of play action, which we saw some great play action in the first half, you get Dobbs going downfield. You get Lazard crossing over the middle. Once the defense has to allocate the resources, more in the box, bigger personnel, because it is so hard to stop Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Even in this game, Jones 4.8 per carry, Dillon 5.7 per carry. And the long for each was 11. Again, it's not a case of one big run boosting the averages. They move the chains really effectively, but the balance just went away entirely. Like early in the year, it was, I think, a little too conservative. In this game, it went from a pretty good mix, especially on the touchdown drives, to just throw. And I think, not to skip ahead too quickly, but the seminal moments in this game were the 3 and out after the Giants tied it up, 3 pass attempts, no rushes, punt, no yards, nothing. And then the red zone, going for it on 3rd and 4th, obviously on 3rd, but 3rd and 4th down and 2, in the red zone. Both throws, both get batted away by the Giants pass rush. And the Green Bay did get another chance, and that pass also gets batted down into a fumble. Like, it's extra embarrassing that they couldn't even get the ball to the line of scrimmage on their bad decisions. Like, I don't think it needed to be that bad for those to be the wrong call, but it really highlighted just like why. What I mean, the last one was a Hail Mary. That's just a failed play. But the 2 yards and 2, and I know Aaron Jones after the game did say he would have bet that he or AJ could have gotten 2 yards if either of them had gotten a chance on either of those 2 plays. I would bet that too.
Yeah,
Aaron Jones.
me too.
Like, that's a good
I
bet.
don't know if there's anyone on the planet who would not make that
Aaron
bet.
Rodgers,
Like,
apparently, and LaFleur. And we should tackle this. I don't want to get too deep into it because it's a little unknowable. Rodgers has a lot of control at the line of scrimmage. LaFleur is the coach who calls the plays. I just think we say it's both. Like, there's got to be credit and blame attributed to both. Personally
even if it's one or the other.
Rodgers. Yeah, go ahead.
If it's one or the other person has to chime up and be like, no, we're not doing that again. We're not getting positive results out of it. We need to run it this time. Like, so it could easily, we don't know which one, so we can't shift the blame to one person specifically, but even if we wanted to assume that was the case, there are multiple decision makers in that process who can use their voice and be like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this again? And 2 yards, you've got 2 downs to get them. You're, 6 yards away from the touchdown that sends it to overtime or gives you a chance to win it with a 2-point play. And you're passing both times. You're like, and I think the decision gets made there kind of on the first attempt. Do you think it's more visceral to turn over with the run on downs at that point of the game? I don't know.
I don't.
I would like to see the run though from third down straight away. That would have been. And then if it's even a marginal gain, if you gain inches, if you gain a yard, you're like, okay, well now we've got a yard for AJ Dillon to go and get. It's like, yeah, again, I'm going to take those odds. But when you throw and very, very nearly intercepted when that one's kind of batted down and almost recovered, and then for the same thing to happen again, it's wild, really, really wild, just how you get to that point. And you get Rodgers kind of end the game with that wry smile on his face. And you'd love to know, maybe we wouldn't, what's going through his head.
We will on Tuesday.
What exactly are you thinking?
Pat McAfee Show listeners will know on Tuesday what was going through his head, I'm sure.
Someone else can tell me.
Yeah. It'll be all over, I'm sure. But yeah, it was just one of those moments. And, 2 rushes before that, 1st and 10, Aaron Jones up the middle for 7, 2nd and 3, Aaron Jones up the middle for 2. So ESPN is actually calling it 3rd and 4th and 1. I did think it was 2, but whatever they attributed as, it was 3rd and then 4th and short. And I think if you want to go for a pass on one of the downs, obviously they had to go for 2. You're down 7 with less than 2 minutes to play in the game. I don't even hate if you want to throw it once. I thought the plays they were running, that is not the time to me to go out to the side and a pass play that can be risky, can easily lose you yards. And at that point, I'd rather just have the safety of the rush. But given this team and the makeup of this team, the way they run block, I think the offensive line is a weird one to evaluate because I think their pass blocking has been highly suspect lately. But the run blocking seems pretty good because the running backs continue to thrive. So it's a bit of an odd split there. But if you don't get the 4th and 2 rush, whichever it is, as long as it's a real rush play, we had, what was that? Was that the Vikings game where they did
stopped on the goal line?
Yeah, the snap on the goal line where they basically did the read option, which is like trying to do both at once and neither thing worked. Do a real running play, like under center, give it to either of those guys. Maybe have Dillon in as the fullback, whatever you want to do. I think if that fails, you just live with it and go, we're a running team. Like, we're a running team. If we don't get it, we don't get it. But I think you live with that just fine. The problem is I don't know if all the personnel and coaching staff always remembers enough that they are a running team, or at least they should be a running team. Because when they are, they're a good offense. And when they're not, they're an offense that scores 0 points in 2 quarters against the New York Football Giants.
The other part of it is, and if you disagree, let me know on this. I don't feel like they have the kind of receivers who are best suited to those kind of routes where you have very little ground to make up, where you're within 5 yards. Like Randall Cobb is Rodgers' guy in that scenario, but I also think he's one of the few receivers on the team where that's a very, very natural route for him to go and score from. Where like just to me, where I'm like, what is my best chance in terms of who's most comfortable in this situation, who's going to be best able to execute what they're good at? I'm going to the running backs. And honestly, if I'm passing, I'm probably more likely even to be targeting someone like Aaron Jones than some of the other receivers. But that's something too where it's just it doesn't even feel like the right play for the personnel that they have. Um, it's not kind of the strength. I don't feel like we've seen issues. Even wasn't quite as kind of compact and congested a field when this happened for him today. But Alan Lazard had a drop today that I thought he really should have had. And we've seen issues with drops from Packers receivers all throughout the season so far. And in those kind of tight spaces where contact is guaranteed to be coming, where the window to get a pass through is really, really narrow, there aren't a whole lot of receivers that I'm like, yeah, well, if you put it to that guy, he's definitely going to catch it. I do think Cobb is like maybe the only guy in that situation. And if Rodgers had have missed the hand on the third down throw, well, Cobb probably does catch it, and then this game is going to
I mean,
overtime.
the shoulder, like he threw it basically directly into the
Or is that the
middle
guy's
of,
head?
yeah, it's
Sorry,
basically
yeah.
his face. Really, really just, you don't, not used to seeing that from Rodgers. Although, I guess Sarta should be, because I think there was a lot of missed throws. I semi agree. I think Cobb is good for it. Lazard, I think, is questionable. Dobbs, I think they've kind of gone away from doing it with Dobbs because he's had some issues with that. Also, like the weird thing with me about the offense in general, I think Watson is pretty suited for it. To finish the thought, they're throwing him to like Tunyon and Tyler Davis. I'm like, why? Why are we? AJ Dillon had 6 touches in this game. Why would that not be AJ Dillon? But I don't get Tyler Davis. Just I don't get the point of it. It's fine, I guess. Watson gets hurt, and I think in the third quarter with a hamstring, and did not return. Tough rookie year so far with injuries. I think he's a guy where you just get him the ball and he just does stuff, and it's exciting. But the odd thing is, I just feel like we're not at that point anymore where we were at like week 2, where all of the playmakers were a question mark and there needed to be this weirdness. Like I think it's pretty well established that I mean Watson is still has no set role as a true wide receiver yet, and it's a work in progress. But Lazard and Dobbs and Cobb are all like very capable of running the typical routes. It's just I feel like the settling in has happened enough at this point. Maybe it hasn't. The other thing
Well,
about
actually, let me counter my own
yeah,
point
yeah,
with
yeah,
one thing there. The other counter to this is Mercedes Lewis caught a touchdown earlier in the
the London
game,
legend. I think that's his
which
4th touchdown in London.
he's clearly the only Packer who likes playing in London. We'll get to someone who really doesn't later and has spoken about it now multiple times from his previous trip to this one. But on an occasion like that, I think part of the difference is, and that's where if it's some of your bigger bodies, again, if it is like Robert Tunyon, get some good blocking going. Romeo Dobbs continues to be really, really impressive as a blocker and just
Lazard too, I
creating
would say.
space.
But yeah, Dobbs
Lazard
is
too.
someone we didn't
That's
know.
something we're used to with
Yeah.
Lazard, but Romeo Dobbs, it's like okay, well that's something he's settling in at a really high level and creating good space, easy scoring opportunities. It felt like just that kind of creativity was gone from those final 2 plays, though, and the execution clearly just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Is that down to then, some of the younger guys, some of the less experienced guys, they're not used to being in roles of such prominence in those kind of big moments where it's very much now or never? I don't know, but you do have guys who can do it, and they're your running backs, and your quarterback certainly knows what those moments are like. So he should be saying, "Hey, let's make sure the ball goes to the guys who do know how to do that." Aaron Jones is the obvious one. It's just
Yeah.
it continues to be pretty egregious one way or another most weeks at this point. Um, how many touches Jones is getting, or when he's getting those touches, might be even a better way of putting it. But it's pretty inexcusable how those final 2 plays played out, particularly after the way the whole second half played out, because the second half falls apart because of the same thing that ultimately cost you on the final two plays, and that's going away from the run entirely.
Yeah, I think the 3-and-out was actually more egregious with the game tied because that is, I know people will argue in all sports about momentum. I think football, maybe it's felt the most. And the Giants tie it up and they're finally moving the ball. And we'll talk about defense shortly, but not great in the second half, pretty clearly. And the Packers get the ball back. I want to say about 6 minutes left. Tie football game. That to me, knowing this team and the personnel just screams, this is going to be a drive where we are handing it to Jones and then Dillon and then throwing. And maybe not obviously not that predictably. Maybe it could be that predictable and it would still work though. Like the Giants did not have good answers to those guys running. Their defense had much more success getting to Rodgers and blowing up plays than they did stopping Green Bay's running backs reliably. That's just the perfect situation for that. Tie football game, run down some clock, but you're not in a position where you need to move super fast. 6 minutes is plenty of time to still hand off, especially given how explosive those two players are. And I believe it was 3 straight passes, none even targeting the running back. So it's not like there was a run by proxy in there. It was incomplete deep to Lazard, short middle to Cobb, deep left to Lazard. So 2 shots and then 1 to Cobb that I don't remember exactly why that got broken up. And then a bad punt by O'Donnell, surprisingly. Oh, it was actually, no, it was almost a fumble. It was a weird punt play by O'Donnell. But that I just, in that situation, and actually I was wrong, there was 10 minutes left in the game, not 6 minutes. So plenty of time to run the football. It's just bizarre. And I do think this is the weirdest part of the Green Bay offense, is it seems like almost every game, it's always worse late. I don't know if they get tight, if they get shook, if it's Rodgers or LaFleur, that combo saying, we got to put the ball in, reigning back-to-back MVP. We got to have the ball in his hands here. I don't know what it is, but it's truly bizarre because the obvious successful game plan is there. And it's not like, I don't think, outside of the Vikings game where they just got manhandled, it's not like they've been in situations where we just can't run. There's just not enough time left. That's an obvious running, methodical drive situation for any team because run down that clock and give less time for the Giants to answer back when they're kind of rolling. And then you punt, you gain 0 yards, you eat 30 seconds, and the Giants run down and take the lead that they would hold until the end. That drive to me is even worse. I mean, I think the 3rd and 4th and 2 or whatever were bad, but I think that 3-and-out is just like that's where you truly lost control of the football game.
Yeah, I think the final drive, what hurts with that is kind of in spite of yourself, you got yourself in position to do
Right.
what you needed to do. So that's where that one stings. To your point about momentum in any sports, but perhaps even more so in football, the reason for that is because it's an offense-defense game. And if your offense is not giving your defense time to rest and the opposing offense is growing in confidence, well, things can go downhill really quickly. And that's what happened here. It wasn't the best defensive half at all from the Packers. The run defense really crumbled, but is part of that down to the fact that they spent a lot more time than they really should have? If the offense had anything going on the field in the second half, you can't say that it doesn't factor in at all. So part of that is managing a game, and even when your offense isn't firing, the value in just picking up 1 or 2 first downs, finding some way that you can milk the clock and you can buy your guys a breather. Because if you're going to ask them to come out there again, and it's a case of okay, you're going to have to come out there and deliver, and then you're going to have to go back to the sidelines and watch us try to remember to run the ball. That's going to be very frustrating and demoralizing, and I think that's a tough kind of second half for the defense. Not that the defense, both individually and systematically, which I guess brings us to a coaching perspective there too, are beyond any criticism for how things unfolded here. But I do think they weren't given even the slightest ounce of help from the offense, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
And to your point, generally, I mean, we're now on a run where this team doesn't show up for second halves. And they're 3-2, not all that great. This is a stretch where I think we would have liked to see them put their foot down and really kind of show who they are. There's still a couple of games where you'd like to say that will still come to the fore. Right now, I'm not overly confident. But with that 3-2 record, you're looking at a game 1 where, as you said, they get beaten pretty comfortably. but we can all point to reasons in terms of scheme and matchups why that game should not have been such a heavy defeat, and is a
Plus, it's a
game that
week one, which apparently
it's a
is
week
just
one,
it's
which
over
the
for the
Packers just don't
Packers.
they
Yeah,
don't do
yeah,
anymore. We'll add London games to things that they're just they're not interested in, and they should just skip in the future. But I think this team in another world they could be 5-0, and yet I don't think they've played well in a single game, and that's maybe the biggest concern there. Even like okay, quality win somewhat against the Buccaneers, you grind that one out. Same goes for New England, where it really should have been much more comfortable if you look at the personnel you're going up against, but you grind it out. And that's something where if the spark then comes and you see a really positive performance that gives you real hope, you're like, okay, well, that's a sign of a good team, a resilient team, a winning team. Found ways to get it done when they weren't playing well. We're through 5 weeks now, and I'm still waiting for the Packers to play well. That
yeah.
is alarming.
It's really alarming. I think it's normal for NFL teams. I was just listening to Sam and Steve on the PFF NFL pod talking about this. All of the recent Super Bowl winners, you can look at a stretch in their season where you just go, they're not right. They just don't have it. Certainly the Rams had their weird stretches. The Chiefs year, they were a little shaky. The Buccaneers, for whatever reason, just could not beat the Saints in the regular season that year. That's normal. I don't think it's normal to get through 5 games, and there's been no point where late in a game I went, Packers look great today. It just hasn't happened, and that is really concerning. And not to get too far, and I want to circle back and talk more about just Rodgers' game for a little bit, but the next 2 games are Jets and Commanders. I think home Jets in Washington for the Commanders. You got to win both. Because the Vikings, although it was shaky, did beat the Bears today. They're 4-1. The worst they're going to do is split, from the Vikings' perspective, split the season series against the Packers. They have a softer schedule. So they might blow it. They're the Vikings. They do that. But that game in Lambeau is going to be really important, because then, basically you're half game back by default. And just all the easy games now are important. This should have been one. I mean, the Giants are 4-1. Yes, they played a good game. I just don't think they have the personnel of a true 4-1 team. We'll see how they play the rest of the year.
I'd be stunned. They don't have the depth. They don't have the personnel to go the distance. Like it feels like something that's just going to run out of gas at any moment.
Yeah.
Kind of felt like it should have today when Barkley's out of the game for a long stretch. You're like, oh, well, this should be it.
Yep.
And the Packers let them off the hook on that.
Yeah, and they have no plus pass catchers. Daniel Jones is on a bum ankle and looked like I think he would have rushed for more yards if he was a little healthier. But I will say, I thought the Giants seemed like they were schemed up well. And I think they really put their players in good positions, and especially in that second half had a sound plan. I don't think it's a coincidence that they scored 14 of their 27 points in the fourth quarter after that defense just had to keep going out on the field, did not get any breaks in that second half, really. I think, though, that's very connected. But Rodgers in general. Oh, they need to win the next 2 weeks, and then the hard games start. And they also need to they need to play a good football game in the next 2 weeks, even more importantly.
Yeah, you can't have 2 ugly wins and then go play the Bills and be like, oh, it's going to be fine.
It's in Buffalo, too, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a little banged up now. We'll see what they look like then. But that is maybe the best team in the... We'll preview the Bills game when we're there. But there is a world where we feel okay about that game, but we need to see a different Packers team over these next 2 weeks. Because right now, that's not going to go well for Green Bay. But Rodgers, part of the reason, I think, for me of, I guess, pessimism, and I don't want to be a downer Packers analyst. I do think there is a great football team in here. It just hasn't put together the pieces. Rodgers on these deep throws has just been inaccurate. It's just not been good. And I think the worst example, I believe this was still the first half, but the throw to Cobb, where he clearly had his man beat on the streak to the end zone. I think it was back foot. There was pressure coming. I just feel like I'm so used to seeing Rodgers just find a way to get the ball.
Was this the one where it was kind of caught behind Cobb and he nearly got a hand on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even you make a good point about his deep throws, even some of the medium stuff, because there's another one to Cobb kind of on the diagonal where Rodgers is kind of over in the right field and Cobb goes streaking towards the end zone in the left corner. and it's overthrown by like a good 8-9 yards. You're
Yeah.
like, whoa. And he's not having to throw it that hard. Like, you're not that far away. So that was an issue kind of beyond that. And it's been a thing a few times. There's one with Dobbs too, where Rodgers was really shaking his head. And I was like, is he blaming Dobbs
Oh,
for
the
not
out
being
route.
there
The
for
out
that?
route was right
Yeah,
after the
where
Cobb
it's
one. And I thought, again, it's maybe the communication was off, but also, I mean, where he was at in the route, there's only so many places he's going to end up, right? Like, I think even if it's a little off, the ball should have still been catchable for Dobbs, and there was just nothing there, no play there for him. And then I think right
yeah,
after that, he takes a
I didn't
sack.
see anything with the route unless like Rodgers is like, you should have been 4 yards faster.
Right.
Like, it's not that close. This is not a pass thrown even within any kind of diving distance. These are just being kind of airmail over guys' heads. That is a big concern.
Yeah, I think one of the Lazard ones I think was pretty perfect that he was able to haul in, but a lot of them it felt like some of them were bad decisions. Like Lazard wasn't that open, and they got away with that in the Patriots game. There was one where I was screaming, "Run, run, run the ball," and he just throws a perfect strike to Lazard. And it's like, okay, that I think that the issues for the Packers on offense boil down to Rodgers isn't doing that consistently anymore. Like
Yeah, he's
five
not
years ago,
MVP Rodgers this
2
year like
years
he was
ago,
last two.
yeah, last year, it's just like he could say, "No, I'm just going to throw it because I'm Aaron Rodgers." It's like, oh, it works out. Early, it felt like he couldn't do that because of the pass catchers. These last 2 weeks doesn't look like it's been those guys' fault. It's like he hasn't been able to do that because he's just not placing the throws where they need to be. And some of it is open throws that he's missing. Some of it is tight window throws that they're not perfect, so they just end up incomplete. Those are the kind of dangerous balls that can also get picked as well. That didn't happen. There were no turnovers for either team in this game. But it's just like that extra like really freaky precision has not been there at all. And not saying Rodgers is terrible, but it took him 12 more passing attempts to get 5 more yards than Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones.
First half, Rodgers was very efficient, which again is to the first half. The difference between the two in the conversation there, but that comes from in the first half there was
Played the
recognition
system.
of, if you want to have easy passes, if you want guys to be open, if you want young receivers to have time and space to make it as easy as possible for them, got to run the ball. And you go away from that, and like that's the part where I struggle with it too, in terms of getting into, well, why is this happening? And if it's Rodgers, he's not helping himself by taking it all upon himself because his own numbers suffer. It's as simple as like, the more it's just a case of, oh, well, it's always Rodgers throwing, the easier it gets for the opponent to cover that. And that's something which is just kind of, I don't know, unexplainable right now. Whether he just turns it on and becomes
Yeah.
MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers this season remains to be seen. I mean, neither of us are going to say that's not possible. Neither of us are going to say that he just could come out next week and be that guy the rest of the season, and then that's not the storyline. That's in play, but I do think, and particularly as like I was going to say, as he gets older, like he is older. He's already
old.
got older.
Yeah.
You've got to have better awareness of a day where you just don't have it quite dialed in, and be like, okay, well, what do we do here to best position the team to win if I can't do that single-handedly? And this team is perfectly designed for that, for a quarterback of Rodgers' capabilities. Like, this is the thing when we talk about losing Davante Adams and all the questions that come out of that. I'm certainly not saying right now, as lots of people were for the season, oh, well, it could be better for him because he's got to look for different guys. He's still at times late in this game. Maybe part of that is he's kind of out there and his head's on a swivel and he's like, where's Davante? It's like, Davante's not there.
It was, where's Cobb? That's what it became. Cobb had as many targets as Aaron Jones had runs in this game. 13 for each. He targeted Randall Cobb 13 times.
That probably wasn't the worst of his decision making by any measure either,
Fair.
based on what Randall Cobb was giving him right
Yeah,
now.
I'm not trying to put Cobb down, but he's not as good as he's been. He's not Tay. Even
For
with
sure.
as good as he's been.
For
Like
sure.
there's still, and I don't think targeting Tay constantly was great offense all the time either, but it was still better than, again, no shade to Randall Cobb. He's had a great season.
If you want to cover your your all-time great aging quarterback, the thing to give him is like absolutely elite running backs. To
Yep.
give him options that when it's not there, it's like, okay, it's not even that we've given you so many options that you've got to find. It's like, no, don't worry about passing when it's not there. We are going to have a running game that is sophisticated enough, that has multiple weapons, where we're able to rely almost solely on the running game from time to time, and that will buy you time. It will give you greater chances. And this is the kind of game where you've got to use that. And if he doesn't have the recognition to pivot to that himself, it's like that's where it's on a coach. You've got to really take control of that and make those calls of like, this is how we win these games, so that in a week down the line, whether it's next week, whether it's like week 12, whether it's on route to a Super Bowl, where Aaron Rodgers can be Aaron Rodgers in the classic sense. If that's to happen, you've got to be able to find ways to win as a team in a game like this.
Yeah, I think, we talked about they have to get it together for prior to the Buffaloes and the harder games. The Jets and the Commanders, like these should be games that, you cannot be great and win. Like, I mean, this game, they could have still won. I mean, the Giants played really well in the fourth quarter and made it tough and put the game away, but it was not out of reach. I think the dream on offense is Rodgers plays within the system and then can still make those special throws when they're there or when he needs to. I think you need one of those things at a bare minimum, or the offense just won't function. So either Rodgers play again, which we've seen series and quarters where Rodgers is, I know people use this as a derogative, the perfect LaFleur system quarterback where he's spreading the ball around, working the middle, handing the ball off a lot, the offense hums. And then there's just those random, like we talked about, the 3 and out where he's just trying to throw downfield and it's not there. Either he has to become that MVP Rodgers who just nails every throw, or he has to buy in for the whole game and just say, yeah, Aaron Jones is going to do more work in this offense than I am this year. And Jones and Dillon are going to be as involved as I am. And that's just how we win football games. If neither of those things happen, though, I just don't think the results are going to ever be there. I think they need one or the other. So in a certain sense, either play or buy into the system. It's all going to come down to Aaron Rodgers, which kind of makes sense considering he's the 2-time reigning MVP who's making a boatload of money and not playing very well this season.
The problem is if you say, if you wanted to point to who views the perfect Matt LaFleur system quarterback as a pejorative, as the ultimate pejorative, probably more than anyone else on the planet, the answer to that question might be Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly.
That's the issue.
Yeah. Which will have to be resolved one way or another over these next several weeks over the course of the season. But let's move to the defense. We spent a lot of time on the offense, which I think is fitting. I do think you have Aaron Rodgers, you can't score points in the second half ever. It's a pretty big deal and worth talking about and a pretty big failure. The defense, again, starts off great. 3 points in the first quarter allowed, 7 in the second quarter, 3 in the third quarter. And then it falls apart, giving up 2 pretty substantial touchdown drives to Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and the New York Giants. I agree. I think they ran out of gas. Another one of those games, though, and it's been a little off and on, but it just feels like the front 7 is not accomplishing enough. Outside of the one big run, they kind of held Saquon Barkley in check. I mean, average is 5.4 with the 40-yarder. So outside of that, pretty reasonable average for a guy who's been the best offensive player in football this year, or at least the best non-quarterback offensive player in football. Daniel Jones, though, 21 of 27, 217 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, but just was able to move the ball in the second half. And it just felt like after a first half where I thought the pass rush was getting there, even though I think there was only 1 sack in this game, Jones was only sacked once.
There's a lot of pressure on him in the first half.
And he was making good throws. I remember saying in the GSPN Discord, which you can get access to at gspn.info, at one point in the first half, I was like, he's got a lot of poise. I think he's really hitting throws. They weren't able to string it together because of the pressure, and it's just harder. But, I thought he made some throws, and that's how they got on the board at all in the first half. In the second half, though, felt like he was under no pressure. He's able to roll out comfortably, wait, and then the soft zone is just letting guys get open. And it felt very much to me like Daniel Jones is better, but like watching Bailey Zappi, they run these soft looping play actions and he just sits there and hits an open throw. And it just looks so easy at times. I mean, Jones made some nice throws too, some clutch ones on third down, but a lot of it just felt very effortless for the Giants offense, which is not ideal when Darius Slayton and Marcus Johnson and Daniel Bellinger are getting big gains against your vaunted defense.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the soft zone. It's not the first time, it's the last time, or maybe if we're lucky, it could be the last time. When the holes appear, they appear in a hurry, and I think week to week there's a greater awareness around the league. It feels like of how to exploit that, and I do think the Giants did have some tools in their arsenal that certainly play to that. And talking just before we started recording, you rightly mentioned that Daniel Jones fit the bill of a quarterback that is just going to cause the Packers problems, which is someone who is mobile and able to rush. And he wasn't at anywhere near his most mobile. I think it is, again, a big concern if the level of mobility that he on his bad ankle today had out there is a problem for you. But it is, because gaps open up and the whole defense just kind of collapses and there are big openings. And generally, I do think there is an opportunity, for opposing teams. Like, if you want to go and, soften up the Packers defense with the rush, well, you may not need to pass at all, because I do think gaps can open up there. And we saw a couple of really notable instances of that today to turn the game. Beyond that, though, we also just saw some kind of sloppiness and ill discipline at key moments that really kind of flipped this game. Rasul Douglas, quite uncharacteristically, had a nightmare game. 3 penalties, I believe, assessed to him. I think 2 pass interference and 1 his last, and maybe the one that was kind of most costly immediately was unnecessary roughness after play, where it should have been 3rd and 5 for the Giants as they were hunting down what proved to be the winning touchdown. And instead, they got a first down out of that when there's no need, when the Packers had actually made a pretty good stand defensively. They held them, and you're like, okay, here we are. It's 2 more plays, and this game is in our hands to win. Just cheap penalties.
Yeah, I think that one.
I'll give the Rasul Douglas quote, and apologies, Ty, but
No, go
Rasul
ahead.
Douglas is going to demand that you mark this podcast as explicit now.
Okay. Fair.
After the game, Rasul Douglas said, I quote, "I'm pretty sure we all feel bad. Looking around, we all look bad. I just told everybody it was my fault. I had 3 uncharacteristic fucking penalties that I don't usually get, but I had them. That fucked the whole defense up." End quote. He's right. It did. Like, that's a very simple thing. The defense was not kind of well oiled in any way today, but the timing of a couple of those, one of them wipes off what would have been a really important sack, and then within a couple of plays, the Giants are rushing for like 43 yards. So that's one key one, and the other is on what proves to be the winning drive for the Giants. Like, not only were they bad penalties, but they were really poorly timed, not giving himself or his teammates a chance to recover either.
Yeah, I think the unnecessary roughness, I know some folks were mad about. The whistle was blown a while, and it wasn't. I think the reason it's called is it wasn't like I think it was Barkley, but I don't remember. It might have been Breida. He might have been out for a possession, or for a snap. But it wasn't that he just went down. It was like the whistle's blowing for a little bit there, and then Rasul basically body slams him, and it's like, okay, you make it kind of easy to throw the flag there. It's just a bit too much. Yeah, it's just I thought very costly penalties and mistakes from Rasul. I thought Eric Stokes didn't look great and was getting beat pretty regularly. Again, not talking scheme stuff, which I don't think was ideal either. I think the soft zone was making it a little too easy for the Giants to move the ball. It just felt like the pressure that we'd seen on Zappi at some points in the Patriots game and that we'd seen over the last couple of weeks after the first half just was never there. And especially in the part of the game where Saquon Barkley was out. I haven't been able to rewatch it all. I still don't understand how the Giants offense was able to function with Daniel Jones, a bunch of WR4s against this Packers defense that is supposed to be so great, and they just weren't. You know, Newmark and I talked about Rashawn Gary being Defensive Player of the Year candidate. He had 3 tackles, none for loss, no sacks. I don't know how many pressures. I don't think
he
that
did
many.
well. He had the sack. It was Darnell Savage had the hold that cancelled out his sack. So, and
So
I
there's
do think
one
the other
that
one,
would have had.
Jaron Reed was the other one
Yeah,
for the
the
Rasul
Douglas.
Douglas hold.
I think it was Jaron Reed
So
and Preston Smith, if I remember right. I could be wrong.
you could be right on that. You could be right.
But just not enough, not consistently, especially against a Giants offensive line that their left tackle is elite. The rest of their line, though, has been pretty shaky this year. And I think that carried through in the first half, and it did not in the second half. And I just think between Saquon eventually getting uncorked, I thought overall, again, they did a reasonably good job with him, just not quite good enough. But just not being able to get to Daniel Jones, not being able to contain him, keep him in the pocket. He was able to roll out so easily and then just wait until somebody got open against that zone, especially with Jair Alexander back. And this was obviously the controversy after week 1 was that zone versus, just letting the corners actually do man more often. I think it would have helped, but I also don't think the defense, on an individual level played well enough either.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point too, and you talk about Saquon Barkley, so as long as 40 yards, so you take that out, and he's 30 yards and 12 carries. Like, it's that one play where they let him get loose, and that does most of the damage there. It's not like he killed them today, even in a way maybe where a lot of people would have anticipated.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the problem. The problem, as you said, even when he's out of the game, the Giants, that's kind of the spell where they managed to get some real consistent momentum going, where it felt like they could get first downs. Daniel Jones, again, to tip our hat to him, he was just delivering, whether it was rushing or passing, when they needed something big to happen. He was coming up with the plays. I do think for the Packers defense, on a day like this where it is tough and it's not going their way, and look, in a weird week, maybe we'll touch on just the idea of playing overseas and the travel and all involved. Although I don't see it as the big excuse that I feel like a lot of Packers are ready to use it as. And honestly, the Flares' attitude towards the game has come across pretty weird all week. And I wonder if that was the way conversations are happening behind closed doors. That's not great. Like, you're seeding an excuse that doesn't need to be there. But on a day like this where you get 2 sacks that are negated for holds, that's a real killer. Because they're difference makers. They're plays where you've changed the possession. You now control the possession, and it's being played on your terms. And instead, you're giving away easy yards. You're giving away first downs. That's kind of part of the story of the day too, which is even when some of the kind of the regular and most reliable defensive contributors came up with big plays, they had a teammate to turn to and be like, "Well, why did you do that?" And now we're in a deeper hole than we were before.
Yeah, worth noting, Saquon also had a 41-yard reception on a short pass, so still gets his total yards up to over 100. But yeah, I think especially the first 6 or 7 Giants plays, all were either rushes or throws to him, and Green Bay had it bottled up. I think they started off great. You can only expect so much, I think, against a player of that level. I do think Saquon Barkley is one of those players who it's really tough to just completely nullify. I think they did enough against him, though. I think Daniel Jones adding in another 200 yards, or it's up for 36 of that to Saquon, so 180 yards of offense to everybody else is the killer. And, of course, Green Bay's offense just stopping any offensive production. Yeah, let's talk about the London stuff. Personally, I think I've seen weird or especially sloggy London games before. And it is. I mean, it's not because of London. It's because traveling over an ocean and playing a game like the Bucks just played in Abu Dhabi, as you covered so well on the last Win in 6 podcast. And those games it just felt like it was almost bubble-esque to me. It felt like a lot of like the Hawks couldn't miss and the Bucks couldn't shoot. And it was like, okay, whatever. Also, the Bucks didn't play that many of their guys in either game. But this game did not feel that weird to me. This game felt exactly like the last parts of the last 4 Packers games. They look like the same Packers team. So if they were scoring 34 a game and then they do this or something else, I would maybe understand it. This just seemed very on brand for a team that has not strung together 4 quarters of good football in one game at all this season.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between these games and how the NFL puts them on overseas as opposed to how the NBA does. There is something just inherently weird about NBA games outside of home markets. The crowd is weird. It never quite gets anything close to the same. Uh, like, that wasn't the case today. I'm not saying the crowd is like Lambeau, but you cannot ask for more than it. One, in just
It
like the
was.
sea of green
Yeah, I was
that
gonna
the
say
players are looking out at.
It was up there, man.
You've got your Packers word marks in your end zones. Like, you've got your green everywhere. Just in terms of eye lines, guys out there with the place getting pretty loud when the Packers were giving them anything to cheer about. Like, that's as much as you can hope for outside of being at home.
That was
Um,
maybe like the first time a London home team has actually been the home team. Like, I think the Jaguars really tried. I just don't know if it really stuck.
they tried because the NFL is just trying to make
Right.
them like
Yeah.
useful in some way, but nobody wanted them. Where I
Yeah.
can go back to long before I was ever into the NFL, like as a 14, 15-year old, like in high school. And I had lots of people in my ear, lots of friends who were into the NFL and were Packers fans and were wearing Packers jerseys.
It showed
And that's
up.
certainly something in Ireland. That's definitely something in the UK.
Mm.
And then that's not even going to factor in, like, I'm sure there was large numbers who traveled from Germany, for example, who were Packers fans. So you aren't going to get maybe any other franchise that you're going to get that effect for a London game, which it is interesting that the Packers definitely enjoyed themselves. The other things though to talk about with that, and I think it changed too in the London games in recent years. Shifting from Wembley to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has been a massive change and change for the better. The games have been better, and honestly, I think a lot of the excuses need to go away. The Wembley pitch was famously really bad for quite a few years, so complaints about the quality of the field and how it felt underfoot, I think would have been very, very valid for a long time at Wembley. Wembley is the national stadium in the UK. It only gets used for soccer games, FA Cup, national team games. You're probably talking 10 to 12 times a year max, and then it's a concert venue beyond
Mm.
that. So it's the pitch is never maintained to the same level that somewhere like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where it's week to week, your groundskeepers can't let it slip at all. And Tottenham's pitch is, I think, been very well commended and awarded kind of in a global sense for the quality. And I thought the field looked great today. I don't know, I didn't catch too much after the game, but they're all the kind of things that I think used to be a factor in the London game, where it felt much more makeshift in a lot of ways. That's all gone now. Like it's just not a factor at all. It looked like it could have been in Lambeau.
Yeah.
At times it sounded like it. I think the field looked good, and even for the travel, like they got there pretty early. They got there early. They're staying at the Grove, which is where the English national football team have stayed for years. It would be one of the best sporting facilities, kind of luxury hotel with grounds that you can go and have your practice on site in the UK. Like I don't see a whole lot in their preparations in anything else. So you just didn't execute on the field is really what the game kind of looks like. And as much as kind of other elements of that may bubble under the surface, or even fans may look to use them as outs, I don't think they're really there in this case. I think it was all set up for the Packers to have a win, a good win, like it looked like they were going to do in the first half, and then they just rolled over and died, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, I think there were times where I feel like I kind of did forget it was a game in London. I mean, obviously, you see like the sideline is different and there's no Lambeau leaps or that kind of thing. But it was like clearly a Packers home game over there. I mean, if they ever go back, and it seems like they may try to resist doing so, but if they ever go back and it's another team's quote unquote home game, it will be that only in the word marks on the field. Like
Yeah,
clearly the
yeah, that's
Packers
it.
fans are going to show up and take over as they do in some opposing stadiums in the NFL over in stateside. Not too many, I'd say. Like will be that. But yeah, I just think it's just excuses. It's just being whiny at this point. It's a little frustrating between the close wins where it's a win. It's win is a win is a win, and something like this where we're gonna hear all about London. Like, address the issues with the football team. Like the I was gonna say the water in the toilet go in the other direction. Doesn't even change. It's the same hemisphere. It's the same.
It is the
It wouldn't
same
even be
hemisphere.
that.
I
So I
was
don't
like, what
even.
is Ty talking about?
Just the unit, different units. I don't think that's what sunk you. Like they're not.
We're still talking yards.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna say they're not like they marked the field in millimeters or something. There's no
Listen,
reason
the
that.
UK are doing what they can to get away from the metric
It's
system in
true.
recent years, Ty. So
I'm not gonna wait anymore. I always end up in geopolitical hot water. But the point is, there was no reason that it should have been different. And the other thing, just to add on, the travel and everything may be a lot. The Giants had to do the same thing, and they came in with half of a healthy quarterback, and we're still able to execute much better over the course of the game.
what's a flight to LA? What's the flight time to LA from Wisconsin?
I'm gonna ballpark it at, I don't know, maybe 7 hours, 7 or 8 hours.
We're not talking massive differences
Yeah.
here. Like that's the other element of this too. Even okay, there is jet lag, but I'm not. Maybe I'm the worst person in the world to hear any excuses like this because I'm just not going to entertain anyone complaining with the time zone differences between Central Time and British Standard Time. So maybe I'm just an unsympathetic ear here because I'm used to just trying to live my life across both those time zones at once.
6 hours to 10 hours is the count, by the way. I looked it up. From Green Bay to
it's
LA
not colossal.
versus London. Yeah, agreed.
Like it's sure it is there. It's a thing that exists, but I think the more you kind of build it up mentally in the week and you're like, oh, we're going to London in ways that you wouldn't be doing if you're going to the West Coast. I think that's part of the problem. Maybe that is something that they would consider if they are ever making the trip back to Europe. They may not be in London anytime soon. I think the NFL will really want if the Munich game, it is Munich, I think they're doing the regular season game this season too. If that goes well, I just it's so much of a no-brainer for the Packers to go and play in Munich. And that should be a fun thing too. But if you don't make it fun, or if you really go out of your way, like LaFleur's body language and his press conferences, how he talk about it, there was a lot of, what time is it? Where am I? Sort of jokes. It's like, yeah, that stuff gets old, dude. And I don't know if that's the ideal approach rather than just go and embrace it. And no matter if you're feeling that stuff, let's put it out of the way so your players aren't thinking of it too. It doesn't decide the game, but I didn't think that was the ideal approach that it felt like the Packers were taking. And Rasul Douglas, he was quoted 3 days ago. I wonder if I can find it. I have. This is from Ryan Wood. Speak to Rasul Douglas on. It was even earlier. So he played in London with Philly during his second season in the NFL. And so this was on October 6th. So this is before they fly out, just after they've arrived, something like that.
3 days ago. I don't remember exactly.
Just after they've arrived. Probably first
sense.
Media availability.
Yeah.
He's asked what it was like in London previously. Again, I'm sorry, Ty, you're going to have to tag this explicit because of Rasul Douglas.
Yeah,
it's just Rasul Douglas.
We breached it already. It's fine.
Quote, it fucking sucked. You don't get to do nothing over there. You just fucking get on a plane, get over there, and fucking practice, and then you play a game. End quote. That was his quote a few days ago.
I do remember this, yeah.
That's not great. It's not the headspace to be in.
Did they not bring him anywhere? I did hear there was a team that a couple of players did get in trouble overseas a few years back. I think it was for a London game. So there was some hypothesis that maybe the NFL is trying to tighten up a little bit. But it's really weird if they're not like going to see Big Ben or like some other Premier League team. Exactly, like Giannis
that's a massive thing.
He's on the pitch kicking the soccer ball around.
They go to Buckingham Palace. They get their pictures taken outside. Like all of that is almost league organized.
Yeah.
Photo opportunities. And they have the team photo by Big Ben.
We had our qualms, obviously, fairly about the Abu Dhabi games, but it was the same deal. Like they at least got to go and see the whitewashed or whatever versions of the country and try to embrace it. That's what they're there for.
Do you think that's a coach's mentality difference? Just the way that NFL coaches.
I wonder if it's league. I wonder if it's league more than. I don't know. I don't know what the other teams do. Maybe the Giants were all over, maybe not. But it is really weird to me if they go over there and they don't. Like you'd think there'd at least be like some day where they get out of practice a little early or whatever and go do something. London need to have some appreciation for it. Like I kind of get where the players are coming from if they really are just like kind of basically treated like it's a bubble when they go over there, which I just don't know why it would be like that. So I don't know. I don't have the insight there, but it is, that would be, it's bizarre either way. It's bizarre that this was anything that felt so negative. I mean, outside of not, again, you lose a home game, but also you don't really, because the Packers fans in London were incredible. That was the best part of the game. That and special teams. I want to talk about special teams.
I didn't want us to go without talking about Mason Crosby specifically, but
the kick. The
yeah,
fast kick, so impressive.
One just last year, it kind of felt like the end might have been near at times, and not all his fault. He was not put in the best position to succeed, with his long snapper and with all sorts of combinations of things going on with special teams last year. But Mason Crosby has been absolutely fantastic and taking that delay game to, I guess, recenter themselves, get set up better, and it ended up, I think it was a 46-yard kick, right, that he ends up taking.
Yep.
No big deal, no problem. And that's 2 relatively long kicks today, job done, which is also something that I think when we talk about the Packers just failing to deliver in the second half and just a no-show offensively, even if you weren't, getting the best version of yourself today, there was one play where they were in field goal range and then Rodgers ends up taking a sack.
No, he pitched it. Was it the field goal? If it was the field goal right after okay. I'm thinking of a different play then. You go ahead.
No, he sacked to take them out of field goal.
Oh, that play.
On one of the plays.
Where
you look at how close this game is, and again, if you get a field goal there, one, the Giants wouldn't have been taking a safety, and you could have pinned them back there. But secondly, the game is ultimately decided by 5 points. If you had another field goal up on the board already, you're well within field goal range, pretty comfortably toward the end of that game, and you have a chance to win it. Like, I just thought Mason Crosby looked excellent. It's a really positive development for the Packers that the majority of their special teams look vastly improved, very reliable, and honestly are performing at a pretty high level this year. Certainly the parts of special teams that perform with the boot, I think, would be the way of putting that.
Pat O'Donnell had a bad punt.
He did have, but he had plenty of good punts too.
Yeah, and it could have ended up being an inadvertently great punt if the Packers recovered the ball, but it was not a good punt. Oh yeah, his other punts were good. I don't get the Amari. I don't know why Amari Rodgers is on the team. I really don't. There's no, because he was a draft pick. I'm guessing that's the only reason. Like, if Amari Rodgers was an undrafted guy who they tried at kick returner, he's just gone by now, even if the financial guarantee was the same. But he's not worth it. It feels weird to know an exact player's place in the 53, but he's 53rd. There's just no reason for him to be on this roster. Find someone else who can return kicks. They find Rudy Ford. He's incredible special teamser. Like, you can find guys who can do it.
He's purely, at this point, like a punt returner. Like,
but not a good one.
About, yeah, I know, but I'm talking about the struggles that they're having and connecting with passes and all of the questions there. Like, if there's anything there, they're really like, we've got to get him some real reps just receiving generally. It's not going to be that, because no one has the faith that he can do that, and he can't do the one thing he's being asked to do well either. Like, they really got away with the fumble that was recovered. Really, really got away with it. To see him make, I don't even want to say big gains, but even just modest gains is very, very unusual. We've had a couple of times this season where he's managed that, and it's truly shocking. But you're just not getting anything positive there. And then when the doors being open to stuff like the fumble that they got away with today, if that goes wrong, well, the game's turning for a completely innocuous reason. That's a lot more painful. It's one thing your offense just stalls, your defense doesn't deliver, but you can't lose games because of special teams. It's like, it's the one thing you've got to make sure you've got down, and they've improved in a lot of ways, but Amari Rodgers is certainly holding them back right now.
Well, and I think it's pretty clear that Biasacha has done a great job and clearly has that unit ready. They've also just added better special teamsers, and it turns out that makes a difference, so they need to add a better one there. The field goal I was super impressed by with Crosby was Rodgers on 3rd and 10, and this was another one of these sequences where they have first and 10 on the Giants 29, pass, for whatever. The clock is running down, but still, like, call a running play. Actually, no, they were out of timeouts. Never mind. I take that back.
Yeah, they had no time to get set.
They actually had their timeouts for that drive, though, which was incredible. Look how that got you points. Maybe do that more often. But they, for whatever reason, Rodgers under pressure basically flips it to Robert Tonyan behind the line of scrimmage, and he goes down, where if you throw that ball away, it makes it much easier for the field goal unit. Instead, with no timeouts and the clock expiring, they have to rush out there and kick immediately, and they executed it flawlessly. And that's just not easy to do. It's pretty unusual, actually, for a special teams unit to have to rush out there and just go. Obviously, it's 4th down. You can't spike it to kill the clock. No timeouts. There was no choice. But just a really impressive and well-executed kick, especially for a 48-yarder. It's not like they had to run out there and hit a chip shot. So Mason Crosby, maybe the Packers' best player in this game, certainly did the job. It just wasn't enough. Didn't have enough opportunities, as you said.
And on Mason Crosby and on the idea of London generally, so Mason Crosby is part owner of League Two football club Walsall, who he has yet to get to see because of the pandemic and all of that. They were playing at home yesterday. There was an article, I can't remember who wrote the article in the week about this, but about him kind of considering all possible avenues that he could get to the game, get to see them for the first time, including like, should he get a helicopter? What way could he do this? And ultimately he was like, no, there's a chance I'd be late for practice and I can't be late for practice. So he sacrificed even the chance to go and see the team he owns, and the Packers can't, when he comes up with an excellent performance individually, get him a win. So that made me sad too for Mason Crosby.
That makes sense. Yeah, I did see some pics of him like kicking around a soccer ball during the week as well, and I was like, oh, at least somebody's having fun.
I know. I asked in our Discord earlier in the season too, because on some of the photos the Packers put out on Instagram of the players getting on the plane, all the special teams guys were wearing Walsall jerseys. I was like, what's going on? Why are all these Packers guys wearing Walsall jerseys? It turns out Mason Crosby's a part owner now.
We got to get Mason Crosby on the pod. I feel like Mason Crosby, this is the stuff we know about. Imagine how much interesting Mason Crosby stuff we just don't know. Yeah. Sounds too much like Wausau, small city in middle Wisconsin.
A small city is it just repurposing the name of Warsaw, the capital of Poland? That seemed likely.
Maybe. No, if I had to guess, it's a Native American word, as most things here are.
Oh, okay. That's also possible, yeah.
But it could have just
so's the Polish part possible too, though.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
We'll have to look up the naming origins of Wausau, but I think that tells you that we are probably pretty much at the end of this here podcast. We're breaking down the SAW SAU here in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. It's definitely Native American.
Yeah.
Right.
Adam, anything else that we didn't cover? Any last thoughts on Green Bay here as the Packers drop to 3-2 following the L in London?
Not really. It's a kind of a season-defining week coming up, though. It's how do you respond to this? You've lost 2 games early in the season. You're not playing very well. I don't think you have a whole lot there to hang your hat on and be really confident about this turning. So you've got to go and show something real, show something that the fans can get behind, but also that just as a group that they can look to and be like, yeah, that's what the best version of ourselves looks like. And when we do that, we can beat any team in the NFL. So this is a big week. 2 games coming up where, you can probably win them, not at your best once again, but the Packers have got to move past that. It's time to start showing something that is good. I'm not asking for great. I'm asking for good. Can we put 4 quarters together, 2 halves, and just put in some consistent offense, some consistent defense? Nothing needs to be perfect, but it needs to be better than it's been so far.
100%. I think the silver lining is, I think the personnel is here. Like, I think they have enough players to be a damn good football team. Razul freed me up here for this outro. And that combined with, your record is fine. They're 3-2. It's not great. You'd like it to be better given the teams they've played, but that's fine. That's not, especially with a Bucs game in there and the Vikings game, it's not like you have dug yourself a hole that you can't get out of for the playoffs or the division. Things are in the Vikings' control right now, but there's a lot of games left. There should be an opportunity to get back in there and take the division if you start playing well. But it's a time where The season still has a lot of promise. There just needs to be a lot of internal, soul searching doesn't sound right, but just a lot of figuring out on both units, how can we be better? A little concerning, I think, for Joe Barry that we're already getting a lot of reports that Matt LaFleur is kind of telling him how to scheme up the defense. That typically is not a great thing for a defensive coordinator's future. I know you sent into the chat, fire Joe Barry is trending. We'll see on that one. But I'm not saying they have to do that or not. I'm saying the offense and the defense need a different identity, and they need to actually, define that identity, where right now I just feel like we see too much wishy-washy, inconsistent play from this team on both ends. So I think they can do it. I feel like I say this with the Bucs a lot. They just got to do it. Hopefully the Packers can.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. I'm never good at outros, but subscribe, rate, and review, please, this podcast and any other GSPN podcasts that you listen to. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We will be back later this week with a preview of Packers Jets, so look forward to that. And until then, pod random, and talk to you next time.